Imagine this. It is 2 o'clock in the morning. The Arizona desert is silent, the kind of silence that presses against your ears. A quiet street in the Catalina Foothills, just north of Tucson, sits in perfect darkness. No streetlights, no traffic, just starlight falling over adobe walls and cactus gardens. Inside one of these homes, an 84-year-old woman is sleeping. She went to bed a few hours ago after a family dinner. Her phone rests on her nightstand. Her medication sits untouched in the kitchen. Her pacemaker hums steadily beneath her skin, syncing data to her devices with every heartbeat. And then, at 1:47 in the morning, her doorbell camera disconnects. 25 minutes later, at 2:12, the camera's software detects motion near the front door, but there is no video. The footage cannot be recovered. And then, at 2:28, her pacemaker stops communicating with her phone. 41 minutes. That is the window. 41 minutes between the camera going dark and the last electronic trace of Nancy Guthrie. By morning, she will be gone. No goodbye, no note, no sign of where she went. Just blood on the front porch, her belongings left behind, and a doorbell camera ripped from the wall. This is the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie. And as of today, more than 2 months later, she has not been found. If this is your first time here on True Crime Investigator Alex, welcome. We cover cases that demand attention, cases where the facts are stranger than fiction and the questions outnumber the answers. If you believe stories like this one deserve to be told responsibly and thoroughly, hit that subscribe button and leave a like right now. It helps this channel reach more people who care about justice. Now let us go back to the beginning. Nancy Ellen Long was born on January 27, 1942, in Fort Wright, Kentucky. She grew up in a close-knit family, attended an all-girls school, and later enrolled at the University of Kentucky, where she developed an early passion for journalism. She worked on the student newspaper, the Kentucky Colonel, serving as a society editor. It was during her university years that her life changed in the way that all great love stories begin unexpectedly. She met Charles Errol Guthrie on a blind date at a basketball game. She later told her children that she knew she was going to marry him from the very first moment she saw him. They married in 1963, and what followed was a life of adventure. Charles was a mining engineer whose work took the family around the world. They lived in Australia for a time, and it was there, in Melbourne, on December 27, 1971, that their youngest daughter was born. They named her Savannah. The family eventually settled in Tucson, Arizona, in the early 1970s, moving into a burnt adobe home in the Catalina Foothills near Campbell Avenue and Skyline Drive. Nancy and Charles raised 3 children in that house, their eldest daughter Annie, their son Cameron, and Savannah. It was a home filled with faith, warmth, and the kind of steady presence that shapes children into strong adults. And then, on June 10, 1988, everything shattered. Charles Guthrie died suddenly at the age of 49 from a heart attack while on a mining expedition in Mexico. Nancy was 46 years old. Savannah was 16, about to enter her senior year of high school. The loss was devastating. Savannah would later describe it as the moment that ripped her whole world apart. But Nancy did not collapse under the weight of her grief. She set it aside, at least outwardly, and became the foundation her children needed. She entered the workforce, taking a position in public relations at the University of Arizona to help pay for her daughter's tuition. She eventually rose to become the associate to the vice president of university advancement, working at the university from August of 1990 until January of 2007. Colleagues described her as warm, professional, and optimistic, someone whose determination was all the more remarkable because she had entered the workforce later in life, after losing her husband. Nancy never remarried. She stayed in that same home in the Catalina Foothills for more than 50 years. She was deeply involved in her church. She loved her garden, and she adored watching the javelina eat her plants. As she once joked on camera during a segment Savannah filmed in Tucson in November of 2025. She was, by every account, a woman of quiet strength, unshakable faith, and fierce love for her family. Her children grew into remarkable people. Cameron became a fighter pilot. Annie became a poet and jeweler, the author of a collection called The Good Dark, published in 2015. And Savannah became one of the most recognizable faces in American journalism, co-anchoring NBC's Today show for nearly 14 years. But none of that fame, none of that success, could protect Nancy from what happened on the night of January 31st, 2026. That evening was unremarkable. It was a Saturday. Nancy called an Uber at 5:32 in the afternoon and rode to Annie's home, about 10 minutes away, for dinner and games. It was a routine visit, the kind of evening Nancy enjoyed regularly with her eldest daughter, Annie's husband, Tommaso Cioni, and their son. The family ate together. They played games. They spent time the way families do when nothing feels urgent or dangerous. At approximately 9:48 in the evening, a family member drove Nancy home and dropped her off. Her garage door opened at that time, and it closed 2 minutes later. She was inside. She was safe. She was home. That was the last time anyone in her family saw Nancy Guthrie. Now, I want you to understand something about Nancy's physical condition, because it matters enormously to this case. At 84 years old, Nancy lived with significant back pain that severely limited her mobility. On a good day, she could walk down to the mailbox and retrieve her mail. On most days, she could not manage even that. She relied on a pacemaker for her heart. She took daily medication that, according to the sheriff, could be fatal if missed. Her mind, however, was completely sharp. The Pima County Sheriff, Chris Nanos, was emphatic about this point. "She is as sharp as a tack," he said. This was not a case of cognitive decline. Nancy was physically fragile, but mentally clear. This detail matters because it eliminates one possibility immediately. Nancy did not wander off. She could not have walked 50 yards by herself, as the sheriff stated. Whatever happened to her that night, she did not leave voluntarily. The hours between 9:50 in the evening and dawn remain a chasm of uncertainty. What we know comes from electronic data, the silent digital witnesses that recorded timestamps, even when no human eyes were watching. At 1:47 in the morning on February 1st, Nancy's Google Nest doorbell camera disconnected. The camera, mounted near her front door, simply went offline. At 2:12, the camera's software registered a motion alert, categorized as a person on camera. But because Nancy did not have an active subscription to a cloud storage service, the footage was not saved. It was designed to overwrite itself. At the time, investigators believed the video might be lost forever. And then, at 2:28 in the morning, Nancy's pacemaker stopped syncing with her Apple devices. The pacemaker itself continued to function. It was still keeping her heart in rhythm, but the data transmission channel, the Bluetooth connection that relayed information to her phone and ultimately to her medical team, went dark. Between 1:47 and 2:28, something happened inside that house, and the electronic trail, thin as it is, suggests that whatever occurred was methodical. The camera was disabled first. Then the person entered. Then the connection to Nancy's devices was severed, likely because she was moved away from her phone. Nancy was expected at a friend's house the next morning, Sunday, February 1st, to watch a live-streamed church service. It was a routine she followed faithfully. When she did not appear, the friend grew concerned and contacted the family. Annie and Tommaso went to Nancy's home around 11 in the morning to check on her. What they found when they arrived was deeply unsettling. The back doors of the house were propped open. Savannah later revealed in her interview with Hoda Coat B that the perpetrator had used Nancy's own flower pots to hold the doors and the back gate open. Nancy's phone was still inside. Her purse was still inside. Her medication, the medication that could be fatal if missed, was still sitting in the kitchen. The Ring doorbell camera had been physically yanked from the wall, and there were drops of blood on the front porch. Nancy was nowhere to be found. The family's initial reaction, as Savannah later recounted, was to assume that their mother had experienced a medical episode during the night and that paramedics had come and taken her. The propped-open doors seemed to support that theory. Perhaps a stretcher had been carried out the back. But when they realized her phone, her purse, and all of her belongings were still there, that theory collapsed. Annie and Tommaso were among the first to sound the alarm. From the very early moments, Savannah recalled, Annie and Tommy were saying, "This is not the kind of case where someone wanders off." On a good day, Nancy could barely reach her mailbox. There was no wandering off. Around noon, the family called 911. Deputies from the Pima County Sheriff's Department arrived within 10 minutes. And from that moment, the investigation into one of the most baffling disappearances in recent American history began to unfold. Within the first 48 hours, the case shifted dramatically. What had initially been treated as a missing person report was reclassified as a criminal investigation. Sheriff Chris Nanos made the announcement publicly. Evidence recovered from the home indicated that a crime had occurred. The residence was sealed off as a crime scene. Homicide investigators were brought in, and the FBI joined the case to provide additional resources. The sheriff was direct with the public. "We know she just did not walk out of there," he said. "She was taken from her home against her will, possibly in the middle of the night. Taken against her will includes possible kidnapping or abduction. She could not walk 50 yards by herself." DNA testing confirmed that the blood found on the front porch belonged to Nancy. The doorbell camera was missing entirely, physically removed from the property. Multiple cameras had been present at the home, but the footage was either destroyed or inaccessible. Investigators launched a massive search operation, deploying police dogs, drones, and aerial resources with assistance from U.S. Customs and Border Protection. They canvassed the neighborhood. They searched the surrounding desert terrain. They reviewed every security camera within a 2-mile radius, and they found nothing. No trace of Nancy. No witnesses who saw her being taken. No vehicle caught on camera carrying her away. It was as if she had simply ceased to exist in the 41-minute window between her doorbell camera going dark and her pacemaker losing its connection. Then came the Ransom Notes. Within days of Nancy's disappearance, multiple media outlets received communications claiming responsibility for her abduction. TMZ received what it described as an alleged ransom note on February 3rd, demanding a specific substantial amount in Bitcoin millions of dollars sent to a particular cryptocurrency address. The note included details about the crime scene that had not been publicly released, including references to an Apple Watch and a floodlight at Nancy's home. 2 Tucson television stations, including CBS affiliate Cold, also received similar communications through their anonymous tip systems. The ransom notes were bizarre in several ways. They were not sent to law enforcement or directly to the family. They were sent to media outlets. They demanded cryptocurrency, and they included deadlines, one expiring on February 6th, another on February 9th, with no clear consequences specified for failing to meet them. The FBI and the Sheriff's Department issued joint statements saying they were investigating the authenticity of the notes, but they neither confirmed nor denied their legitimacy. The Guthrie family, meanwhile, was living in agony. Savannah, Annie, and Cameron posted a series of increasingly emotional video statements on Savannah's Instagram account. In the first, posted on February 4th, they addressed the kidnapper directly. "Whoever is out there holding our mother, we want to hear from you," Cameron said. "We need you to reach out, and we need a way to communicate with you so we can move forward." Days later, the tone shifted. The family posted another video, one that was more cryptic and generated intense speculation. "We received your message, and we understand," Savannah said, flanked by her siblings. "We beg you now to return our mother to us so that we can celebrate with her. This is the only way we will have peace. This is very valuable to us, and we will pay." Those words, "we will pay," sent a shockwave across the country. A family on national television offering to meet ransom demands for their kidnapped mother. It was a scene that felt like it belonged in another era, another century. As one expert from the DO network put it, high-profile kidnappings like this are extraordinarily rare in modern America. The last comparable ransom case many could recall was the Lindbergh kidnapping, nearly a century earlier, but the family never received proof of life. No photograph, no recording, no evidence that whoever sent the notes actually had Nancy. And that silence was deafening. Meanwhile, opportunists emerged from the shadows. A 42-year-old California man named Derek Kalela was arrested after allegedly sending fake ransom texts to Annie Guthrie's phone. "Did you get the Bitcoin?" His message reportedly read, "We are waiting on our end for the transaction." He was charged with making ransom demands. He had nothing to do with Nancy's actual disappearance. The sheriff was furious. To those imposters who are trying to take advantage and profit from this situation, he warned, "We will investigate and ensure you are held accountable for your actions." Now, let me take you to February 10th, because this is the day the case cracked open in a way no one expected. FBI Director Kash Patel personally released surveillance footage and still images that had been recovered from Nancy's Google Nest doorbell camera. Remember, authorities had initially said this footage was unrecoverable because Nancy did not have a cloud subscription. But the FBI, working with Google, managed to extract the video from residual data located in back-end systems. The technical details of how this was accomplished were not disclosed, but the result was stunning. The footage showed a figure approaching Nancy's front door in the early morning hours of February 1st. The person was wearing a ski mask, gloves, a jacket, pants, and carrying a distinctive black 25-liter Ozark Trail Hiker Pack backpack, a model sold exclusively at Walmart. And on the person's waistband, clearly visible in the grainy footage, was a holstered firearm. The video captured the figure's movements in chilling detail. The person approached the camera and cupped it with a gloved hand, attempting to block the lens. Then they walked to the front yard, ripped a plant from Nancy's garden, returned to the door, and used the plant to obstruct the camera's view. The movements were deliberate but clumsy. An international security consultant who reviewed the footage noted that the suspect's handling of the firearm was amateurish. The pistol was worn in a position that no one with training would use. The gloves were thick and lined, making it difficult to grip objects or a person. This individual, the consultant concluded, did not have a well-developed plan. The FBI confirmed the person was male, approximately 5 feet 9 to 5 feet 10 inches tall, with an average build. They classified him as a suspect, and they increased their reward from $50,000 to $100,000 for information leading to Nancy's location or an arrest. The release of the footage generated an explosion of tips. More than 4,000 new calls poured into the tip line within 24 hours. Investigators received more than 13,000 tips in total in the first weeks of the case. FBI digital billboards appeared in major cities from Texas to California. The face of the masked figure, or rather, the shape of it, obscured beneath fabric, became one of the most widely circulated images in America. If you are watching this, and you have not yet subscribed to True Crime Investigator Alex, I want you to take a moment right now. Hit subscribe. Turn on notifications. Cases like this one depend on public awareness, and this channel is committed to covering them with accuracy and care. Your support makes that possible. Now, let me address something that consumed public attention for weeks and caused immense pain to the Guthrie family, the suspicion that fell on Nancy's son-in-law, Tommaso Cioni. Tommaso Cioni is an AP biology teacher at Basis Oro Valley in Tucson, where he has worked for more than 15 years. He is of Italian descent, married to Annie Guthrie, and they have one son together named Olmo. By all accounts from people who know him, he is a dedicated teacher and a loving family man. The drummer of the band, Jimmy Eat World, who is friends with the family, publicly defended Tommaso and Annie on social media, calling them amazing people and dedicated parents who loved and cared for Nancy on a daily basis. But because Tommaso was the last person known to have seen Nancy, he drove her home from dinner. That Saturday night, suspicion fell on him almost immediately. On February 4th, Journalist Ashley Banfield reported on her program that a law enforcement source had identified Sione as potentially a prime suspect. The claim was not verified by any official. It was not confirmed by the sheriff. It was not supported by evidence. And yet, the damage was done. Social media erupted. Tommaso became what one outlet described as the internet's #1 enemy. Fabricated stories began circulating, stories created by spam factories based in Vietnam, claiming that police had blockaded his home, that he was surrounded, that an arrest was imminent. None of it was true. On February 16th, Sheriff Nanos issued one of the most forceful statements of the entire investigation. To be clear, he said, the Guthrie family, to include all siblings and spouses, has been cleared as possible suspects in this case. The family has been nothing but cooperative and gracious, and are victims in this case. To suggest otherwise is not only wrong, it is cruel. The Guthrie family are victims, plain and simple. Please, I am begging you, the media, to honor your profession and report with some sense of compassion and professionalism. Annie and Savannah both passed polygraph examinations. The family cooperated fully with every aspect of the investigation. And when Savannah sat down for her interview with Hoda Kotb in late March, Kotb asked how she coped with the speculation that her own family was responsible. Savannah's answer was raw. "It is unbearable," she said, "and it piles pain upon pain." She spoke specifically about the toll on Annie, Tommaso, and their son. "There is just a way this is even so much harder on Annie and Tommy and Olmo," she said, "because they are there, and they were there every day for my mom. They made it possible for her to stay in the house that we grew up in, that she loved so much." That last detail is important. Annie and Tommaso were the family members who provided the most daily support for Nancy, who helped her maintain her independence in the home where she had lived for half a century. They were not suspects. They were caregivers, and the public speculation they endured was, in the sheriff's own words, cruel. Now, where does the evidence actually lead? The investigation has proceeded along several tracks simultaneously, and each one has produced fragments of information without yet delivering a complete picture. First, the DNA evidence. Gloves were found at multiple locations during the search. A pair of black gloves was discovered about 2 miles from Nancy's home. DNA testing was conducted, but the results were complicated. One glove's DNA was traced to a restaurant employee who works in the area and has no connection to the case. Other gloves are still being tested at a private laboratory in Florida. Mixed DNA samples were found inside the home itself, meaning the genetic material of multiple individuals was present. Separating and identifying those samples has proven challenging. Investigators have turned to genetic genealogy, the same technique used to identify the Golden State Killer, in an effort to match partial DNA profiles to potential suspects. But as of early April, no match has been announced. Second, the pacemaker data. Nancy's pacemaker was connected to her phone through a remote monitoring system. When the pacemaker stopped syncing at 2:28 in the morning, it indicated a loss of that data pathway, most likely, because Nancy was moved away from her phone, or the phone's Bluetooth range was broken. Importantly, pacemakers do not provide GPS coordinates. They record electrical activity and device status, but they cannot track a person's physical location. Investigators deployed a signal sniffer to try to detect any radio emissions from the implanted device in the areas near Nancy's last known locations. But this technology has strict limitations and requires close proximity to work. The pacemaker data has been treated as corroborating time evidence, not as a tracking tool. Third, the surveillance footage beyond the doorbell camera. Investigators asked residents within a 2-mile radius of Nancy's home to submit any footage from their own cameras captured between January 1st and February 2nd. Specific attention was requested for footage from January 11th, more than 3 weeks before the disappearance, and from January 31st through February 1st. The fact that investigators are interested in January 11th suggests they believe preparatory activity may have occurred weeks before the actual abduction. One set of neighbors, Elias and Danielle Strateguleas, provided ring camera footage showing vehicles passing through the neighborhood between midnight and 6 in the morning on February 1st. Some activity occurred near the 2:30 mark, roughly corresponding to the time Nancy's pacemaker lost its connection. The footage shows headlights and movement, but it is unclear whether any of the vehicles are connected to the crime. Fourth, the search operations. In the days and weeks following Nancy's disappearance, search and rescue teams scoured the desert terrain behind her home and in surrounding areas. Cadaver dogs were deployed. Drones and aerial surveillance were used. Former Pima County SWAT commander Bob Krieger, who knows the terrain intimately, weighed in on the difficulty of navigating the desert behind Nancy's home at night. He stated that carrying someone through that terrain would be extremely difficult, and that in his view, the perpetrator likely carried Nancy out the front of the house, not through the rough terrain in the back. "There is no way they are bringing her back this way," he said. "If they got there that way, they clearly had to go out the front." The cadaver dogs were eventually paused. "They are available if needed in the future," the sheriff told reporters, a careful phrasing that communicated neither hope nor surrender. Fifth, the Rio Rico operations. On February 10th, following the release of the doorbell footage, a person of interest was detained during a traffic stop in Rio Rico, Arizona, approximately 60 miles south of Tucson and near the U.S.-Mexico border. The FBI and Sheriff's Department executed a search warrant on a property and vehicle in the same area. The operation lasted several hours. By February 11th, the individual was released without charges. The sheriff confirmed that the person was determined to have no involvement in the disappearance. Then, on February 13th, another operation unfolded, this time at a residence just 2 miles from Nancy's own home. 2 people were removed from the property. Roads in the surrounding area were closed for approximately 4 hours. One of the individuals was taken in for questioning and released by the following day. The details of this operation have not been publicly explained. The investigation has also faced significant criticism. A law enforcement source told News Nation that the Pima County homicide supervisor who initially responded to the scene had never previously investigated a homicide. Former U.S. Surgeon General Richard Carmona, who spent more than 30 years at the Pima County Sheriff's Department, used the word incompetent to describe the department's handling of the case. He said his colleagues in federal and state agencies shared that assessment. A deputies' union representing more than 300 officers took a unanimous vote of no confidence in Sheriff Nanos. A recall effort was launched, and the Pima County Board of Supervisors voted unanimously to question Nanos about his work history and management of the department. Whether these criticisms are fair, or whether they reflect the frustration of a case that has proven genuinely difficult to solve, is a question that may only be answered with time. What we know is this. As of early April 2026, Nancy Guthrie has been missing for more than 60 days. No suspect has been named, no motive has been confirmed, no arrest has been made, and no trace of Nancy has been found. But the case is far from cold. The FBI maintains a 24-hour command post. A task force of 20 to 24 investigators remains assigned to the case. More than 13,000 tips have been received and are being processed. Genetic genealogy analysis is ongoing, and the combined reward $100,000 from the FBI and $1 million from the Guthrie family remains unclaimed and active. The sheriff has stated publicly that he believes the abduction was targeted, meaning that Nancy was not a random victim. She was selected. This raises a profoundly disturbing possibility, one that Savannah herself addressed in her interview with Co-TB. She fears that her mother was targeted because of her fame. "I do not know that it is because she is my mom, and somebody thought, that lady has money. We can make a quick buck," Savannah said. "I mean, that would make sense. But we do not know, which is too much to bear. To think that I brought this to her bedside, that it is because of me." She paused, and then she said something that broke the hearts of millions. "If it is me, I am so sorry. I am so sorry, Mommy." Her brother Cameron, who has a military background, saw the situation clearly from the beginning. When the family first learned Nancy was missing, Cameron told Savannah on the phone that he believed their mother had been kidnapped for ransom. Savannah asked why, and Cameron said the words she dreaded most. "I am sorry, sweetie, but yeah, maybe because of her." That guilt, whether justified or not, is a weight that Savannah Guthrie carries every day. She has said she wakes up every night, in the middle of the night, and imagines her mother's terror. "And it is unthinkable," she said. "But those thoughts demand to be thought." In late March, Savannah sat down with Hoda Kotb for a 3-part interview that aired on the Today Show. It was her first extended public appearance since her mother's disappearance, and it revealed several details that had not previously been disclosed. She confirmed that the back doors of Nancy's home were found propped open, and that the perpetrator had used Nancy's own flower pots to hold them in position. She confirmed that Nancy was taken in her pajamas, without her shoes or her medication. She confirmed that the family believes 2 of the ransom notes they received are legitimate, while the rest were likely fakes sent by opportunists. And she described the moment she first saw the doorbell camera footage of the masked figure at her mother's door. "It is just absolutely terrifying," she said, "and I cannot imagine that is who she saw standing over her bed. I cannot." She also addressed the speculation about her family with a clarity born of exhaustion and grief. She expressed gratitude to the investigators and the technology companies that recovered the video, saying she hoped it would, at least with people of good heart and compassion, stop the irresponsible and cruel speculation that had started to swirl. And then she made an announcement. She would return to the Today Show on April 6th, not because the pain was over, not because she was ready, but because she could not stay away any longer. "I cannot come back and try to be something that I am not," she told Kotb. "I do not know if I can do it. I do not know if I will belong anymore, but I would like to try. I would like to try. I cannot not come back. This is my family. I think it is part of my purpose right now." A retired FBI agent, commenting on Savannah's decision, put it this way: "What Savannah is doing by returning to today is something I have seen families do in cases like this more times than I can count. You get up, you put one foot in front of the other, you trust the authorities to do their job, and you keep living, because the alternative is letting whoever did this win twice." Now, as this case enters its 3rd month, there are several threads that remain unresolved. The identity of the masked figure on Nancy's doorbell camera has not been established. Despite the release of the footage, despite the backpack being identified as an Ozark Trail model sold at Walmart, despite the FBI reviewing footage at least one Walmart location in Tucson, the person remains unknown. The ransom notes have not been definitively authenticated or dismissed. Savannah believes 2 are real. The FBI has made no public determination, and there is unverified speculation, raised by commentators including Megyn Kelly, that one of the notes may have been less a ransom demand and more of an apology with a claim that Nancy had gone to be with God. If that is true, it would suggest that the abductors know Nancy is no longer alive. But this remains speculation, not confirmed fact. The DNA evidence has not produced a match. Genetic genealogy is a powerful tool, but it takes time. The mixed samples found at the home complicate the analysis further. Investigators have acknowledged that there are concerns the DNA recovered may not yield a usable profile. The investigation into pre-abduction activity continues. The request for footage from January 11th indicates that investigators believe the perpetrator may have surveilled Nancy's home or made preparations weeks in advance. This is consistent with the behavior observed in the doorbell footage, where the suspect appeared to know the location of the cameras but lacked the sophistication to disable them efficiently. And then there is the question that haunts everything. Is Nancy still alive? The sheriff has said there has been no sign of life, but there has also been no sign of death. When the family announced their $1 million reward on February 24th, Savannah acknowledged that while they still believe in a miracle, they also know that she may already be gone. The language of the family's public statements has shifted gradually from desperate hope to steely resolve. We will not stop searching, they have said. No detail is too small. Someone knows something, and someone does. In a case like this, with this level of planning, a masked intruder who knew where the cameras were, who brought a weapon, who used a backpack, who disabled surveillance equipment in the early morning hours, there is almost certainly someone beyond the perpetrator who has information. A friend, a partner, a family member, a neighbor, a CO worker, someone who noticed a change in behavior, someone who saw something strange, someone who heard a conversation that did not make sense at the time. That person may be watching this right now. If you are, here is what you need to know. The FBI tip line is open 24 hours a day. More than $1.2 million in combined rewards are available. And as one former FBI agent noted, in high-profile abductions, breakthroughs can come from the most unexpected tip, perhaps one still waiting to surface from the thousands already received. Nancy Guthrie was not a public figure. She was not famous. She was a widow who lost her husband when she was 46 years old and spent the next 38 years building a life of faith, service, and devotion to her children and grandchildren. She worked at the University of Arizona for nearly 2 decades. She volunteered at her church. She watched javelina eat her plants and laughed about it on camera. She was, in every sense, a private person living a quiet life. And someone took her from her bed in the middle of the night, in her pajamas, without her shoes, without her medicine, and vanished into the Arizona darkness. The search for Nancy Guthrie is not just a headline. It is not just a case number. It is an 84-year-old woman who deserves to be found. It is a family that deserves answers. It is a community that deserves to feel safe. And it is a reminder for all of us that the people we love are never as safe as we assume, that the quiet neighborhoods we trust are not always as quiet as they seem, that the darkness that falls over the desert at night can hide things we never imagined. As I speak to you now, Savannah Guthrie is preparing to return to the Today Show for the first time in 2 months. She will sit in that anchor chair and face the cameras that she has faced for nearly 14 years. But this time, she will carry something she has never carried before: the unbearable weight of not knowing. Is her mother alive? Is she suffering? Is she gone? And will the person responsible ever be brought to justice? These are the questions that keep Savannah awake at 2 in the morning. These are the questions that haunt the investigators working around the clock in Tucson. And these are the questions that, as of this moment, remain without answer. But here is what I believe, and what I think the evidence supports. This case will be solved. The DNA is being processed. The footage is being analyzed. The tips are being followed. And somewhere, someone is carrying a secret that grows heavier with every passing day. Silence does not last forever. It never does. The truth has a way of surfacing. Sometimes it takes weeks. Sometimes it takes months. Sometimes it takes years. But it surfaces. And when it does, the world will know what happened to Nancy Guthrie in those 41 minutes of darkness. Until then, we watch, we wait, we remember, and we refuse to look away. This has been True Crime Investigator Alex. If you made it this far, I want to thank you. Your attention to cases like this matters more than you know. Every view, every share, every conversation about Nancy's disappearance keeps her name in the public consciousness and keeps the pressure on those who have answers they have not yet given. If you have not already, subscribe to this channel, leave a like, share this video with someone who cares about justice. And if you have any information at all about what happened to Nancy Guthrie, please contact the Pima County Sheriff's Department at 520-351-4900 or the FBI at 1-800-CALL-FBI. Nancy's family asked the public to search their memories, especially around the key timelines of January 31st and the early morning hours of February 1st, as well as the late evening of January 11th. They asked people to consult camera footage, journal notes, text messages, observations, or conversations that in retrospect may hold significance. No detail is too small. It may be the key. Bring her home.